welcome back for another episode of the Delusion Rehab Podcast. My name is Lauren, and if this is the first delusion you're jumping into, know that this is a pod fully dedicated to helping others come to their own reality checks a little quicker than I did, hopefully, and learn that some of these delusions have actually stolen away some of the good parts of my life because I simply chose to believe these lies for far too long. I think on paper, I'd always known what I'd believed to be a lie. And yet I also thought I'd be the exception to the rule and my life would work out differently than the billions of people out there who have ever existed on earth. So, yeah, that's the level of delusion we're talking about. Me against billions in the world that have already proven the lies to me time and time again. I'll say it again. A delusion is a lie that, even when presented with evidence to prove it as a lie, that person still chooses to believe the lie against all evidence given. So, as I speak today, I hope that what you realize is that if you've been believing these things, hoping that you're the exception to the rule, that you don't have to learn it differently than other people, I'm here to tell you we're going to learn this together. We're going to get through this together. And this is a judgment free zone always. So before we get after it, I did want to give you a thank you. Big shout out to those who have already been diving into this pod. It's so fresh on the scene and it feels so good to know I have supporters already. So if you leave a positive comment below, I'll be sure to include you in a monthly drawing to win an Amazon gift card from yours truly as a token of gratitude for believing in me and pressing play in the midst of your precious time. I'm going to do that drawing at the first Tuesday of the month. And of course, the first one happens to be April Fool's Day. No joke. So put those comments in, and April 1st, it will be the first pod with the first winner. So, okay, here we go. Buckle up because today is for all of the perfectionists out there who feel constantly embarrassed and don't know why they can't get over themselves. Because I've been known to be the most delulu of them all when it comes to this area. And it does involve personal embarrassment. So, as I always start, take a moment to assess if this is a topic you're willing to tackle today, emotionally and physically, or if you are just ready to dive right in and have me dish out all the dirt and give you all of the tea of what happened earlier in my life to get me at least to this point where I'm acknowledging my delusion, but I'm also working through it. This pod is about self-reflection, so it's typically going to be super uncomfortable for an anxious extrovert like me who can't stand being alone to know that I chose to be here with you today because I understand the rough and tough time it takes to be present with your hard feelings and to sort through that and understand why it's hard. I want you to come away with the notion that delusion could be contagious, but we can fight it together. So, as we're going through this, be aware that you are completely in a camp of people that understand delusion is present, but it is still not going away just from simply telling yourself to have it go away. It's clear that that's not enough for the delusional like myself to constantly be presented with evidence. I think it goes deeper down into why did I even start believing this delusion at all? And so let's get right into it. The second delusion of the Delusion Rehab podcast. If I don't give off a positive impression, my value must not be significant. So I'll say it again so we can kind of soak in what that delusion could mean for you. If I don't give off a positive impression, my value must not be significant. So as you're listening, continue to think on that. Try to piece together if that is how you operate in your daily life with that that mindset and that notion, or if you do equate your value to outward perspective and how you're being perceived. The definition of value, you know me, got to start right off at the top, sharing what value is, which is the regard that something is held to deserve, its importance, worth, or usefulness. What I find most interesting about this definition is that it came with synonyms, and one of them was desirability. I think I've always thought that value was equivalent with how desired I am on a scale of where people see me and see what I've come through and say, is she worthy? Can I still find desire for who she is and what she does, even seeing what she is? So, as you can imagine, value can be pretty subjective if we let it be. So, I have learned so far that in creating this pod, I know that the content will be good as soon as I think to myself, do I really want to share this? Because this is a topic that I know I'm coming right out with episode 2 on some of the hard stuff. And I think that there's a big reason why I'm starting off this way. It's because I can't seem to get away from this narrative. The embarrassment I suffered in public school. It is not a unique story. I know that that story exists in some way, shape, or form with many people in my life. And sometimes it comes out in a way that's not traditional. Uh, it's not sitcom, 90s, 80s movie, you know, kids being mean and wedgies and, swirlies. What is that? What do they call it? I don't know. All of the pranks that they pull on these nerds in the bathroom. Like that is the traditional view of it. But I'm talking about the hardcore embarrassment that comes with all the things that you wish you weren't called out for. So, like I said, I'd love to be the person that says that of all my problems, I don't have an embarrassing childhood. But at least from my perspective, that's a lot of where my personal self disappointment came from. That's a heavy statement, self disappointment, but I think that that's going to lead us right into what's going to be most prevalent in this pod today. And that is, why do we value ourselves less just because we think that we are being perceived as less? So who was I to be so embarrassing? Little Lauren Winner. Well, let's start off with the fact that I was a big teacher's pet, which everybody kind of on the surface knows is pretty low key embarrassing because you're seen as being best friends with the teachers and you don't have too much else going on. I did like to talk to my teachers a lot, especially my homeroom teachers when I got into junior high and high school. Um, I think I did not realize at the time that they were kind of like a precursor to a therapist because they're an adult that wants to see you succeed, most likely. And when you come in with any type of emotion, they want to help you. My husband is a teacher and he was for junior high, and now it's more of a high school situation. And I can tell that he actually does get emotionally invested in the stories of his students because he really does want to see them succeed. And I guess I was a product of that. And my teachers looked at me that way. But kids kind of hate teachers' pets, right? Like, it's like, oh, great. Like, you get all the good grades and you raise your hand first and you just make a scene about it. And it just did not get me a good reputation. I was bad at sports, embarrassing. Took the time to try out for a couple of sports. I'm sure this will end up at a future pod, but I did soccer in third grade. And spoiler alert, that's going to be a podcast about how you cannot quit on yourself just because you want to. I did try out for basketball and field hockey in junior high. The most embarrassing was that I tried out for basketball and I didn't even get into the lowest skilled team. I didn't see my name on the paper on the door. And the only saving grace I had in that moment is I'm pretty sure they wrote the names down of who they wanted during the tryout so that by the time I walked out the door, at least I didn't have to show my face again. It was such a hard time as a kid that was like, look, I just want to be in a sport because I want to say I'm in a sport because I want to be cool. And like, as I know that that sounds flippant and like, how could I still be carrying this at a 30 as a 33-year-old? But I think that a lot of us have carried this type of pain in some way or another. And so I'm sure I'm not the only one to feel something similar to that. And by the way, when I did try out for field hockey, I did get in, but it was the lowest tier. It was called the pony team. So it couldn't even be called the JV or varsity team. I think I made one scoring point the entire season, and I'm sure it was against a goalie who was barely as good or as bad as I was, however you wanna look at it. Straight up embarrassing. I also seem to have crushes on the most ineligible people to my league, if you wanna call it like that. I almost liked the most popular boy in school 99% of the time. Like the Aaron Samuels in Mean Girls, that's who I wanted to date pretty much since I'm gonna be honest, I was into boys like in first or second grade. I did not end up having a boyfriend until I was 18, almost graduated out of college. Let's save that story for another day too. But it just felt embarrassing to always have to admit that the guy I like is nowhere in my league. He's not even close in terms of popularity. Um, I do keep this generally anonymous as a pod, but I do want to say for anyone listening that went to Boyertown, I think that I was probably one of the many girls who had a crush on 3 guys with the same first name, and I think anyone that went to Boyertown class of 2010 would know exactly what I'm talking about because those 3 guys, it completely checks all boxes that I would have as having a type and most Boyertown girls would have as a type in that they had to be class clowns. They were probably previous or current pot smokers, and they had no shame in asking me if they could copy my homework because I would give it to them because at least they saw me as somebody. I mean, it's oh my gosh, that's embarrassing to even say right now on this pod, but yes, like I would let them cheat off my homework as a good teacher's pet because they were my high school crushes. What can I say? This is just a little flavor of what it felt like to be in public school for me. Disappointing yourself through embarrassing moments can look like a lot of things. And yet, I'm sure that most of the negative feelings that we have start with the idea that if we are just truly being ourselves, it's not getting us positive attention. If anything, it's coming across negative. And how could anyone really see me as valuable when they just see me as an embarrassing person? You know, David and I have this running joke that he hasn't been embarrassed since he was in fourth grade. And I cannot, to this day, go to the grocery store without having an embarrassing moment. I usually come home with a story of how I embarrassed myself by somehow breaking the self checkout system. It's screaming alarms at me as if I'm stealing, or, you know, someone loudly telling me their near death experience, medical history at the deli counter, and having the entire rest of the store hear me listen to this woman, which, yeah, big surprise. That was a true story. Little specific to not have been real. So I have these embarrassing moments all the time. But isn't it kind of ironic that the perpetually cringy people that embarrass themselves or do things that just seem too cringy to watch, they don't end up on the high end of the popularity scale? Every 90s sitcom seems to portray a character as being the embarrassing friend, and that would be me. Like, I'm thinking of, like, I think it was Kimmy Gibbler from Full House. That's me. I'm her. And that was even before social media was starting to come on the scene. Like, MySpace was out when I was in junior high. Facebook was out when I was in high school. I would almost never find myself on anyone's top 8, which I know that back then that was a big freaking deal. And I still talk to people that are like, "Oh yeah, top 8 was a hierarchy not to be messed with." And I'll look back at my Facebook statuses and it'll say things like, "Ooh, just doing homework, you know me, LOL." Like cringy. I am further away from my 18-year-old self than I've ever been in my entire life. Who even is that person? But all that to say, I was not building a strong level of influence back then because I repeatedly gave people reasons to ignore me and feel cringe around me. And that hurts. Just bottom line, that does not feel good to repetitively live out. So my sense of personal value tanked. And it's been a slow and steady buildup to get myself back to a place where I believe that my character and personality is inherently valuable, even if I'm constantly told that it's not. Enter the second phase of that equation, my post college glow up era. I look back at some of the glow up photos I've seen where they'll show someone from 15 years ago to now, and it's like, wow, you know what? I will proudly say I actually see that in myself. I see myself as having a glow up, but I approached it after college not the best way. I decided I wanted to prove to everyone around me that they should have cared more about me back then. And maybe being popular wasn't all that big of a deal because in your post academic life, there are a lot of things that you want more than just to be the has been popular girl or guy at your school. And so I decided after college, I was going to be what I thought popular people wanted the most. So I would look like I had the greatest impact after public school and after moving out of my hometown, and therefore would obviously have more value, right? Well, bring on the Delulu. I made sure it was obvious that all highlights of my life were obvious to everybody and all of my lowlights were hidden. Couple examples. I came out of college and worked for a Fortune 500 company, and it was an audit position, and I got to go to Australia first class. And you better believe I shared about that. And I talked about it to people that I was just having conversations with, and I would like low key put stuff on social media. But you know what I didn't share? I didn't share that I brought a shoe collection of 13 pairs for that 12-day trip, that I spent a lot of money that was on a credit card to have. I promptly got into trouble with my manager when I got back to the States because when she went to approve my expense report and found out I had multiple charges for overweight baggage because of those freaking pair of shoes, 13 to be exact, back to my embarrassing self. So I wasn't about to share that. So I'd have these good moments of having a good job and a good look, but behind the scenes, I was just trying to be somebody that I wasn't. I had an array of makeup, clothing, and luxe apartment buildings. Yeah, not buildings, units, but they were luxe no matter how you looked at it. And it was probably pretty considered high end for a 20 something single woman to be wearing those things and using those products. And I definitely did not share about the debt that was also involved in that, that I would deeply regret later. And that comes from a girl who graduated with an accounting and finance double major. Talk about no excuses. That I have to take a moment to sit with even now because that was a lot of hard stuff I had to talk to about with David when we were even just dating before engagement. And I think back then I even knew, like, Laura, if you continue to do things that are just a little reckless, even a little bit of a time, you will deeply regret it when something really good comes down the line for you and you have to basically explain yourself. So David has taken it in full grace and we have worked through it. Thank God, praise God that God allowed for us to work together to take something that was not useful with what God had given me in my means and turned it around so that I can be a good steward of the things that God gives. One other thing that I was doing back then, I would share again on social media or with other people that I would have a great church community and that I kept in touch with all my friends, even when I moved to Jersey and then later to Connecticut. But behind the scenes, I was regularly driving to Pennsylvania or New York, depending on my life situation at the time, spending every waking second of my weekend doing anything but being in my apartment alone. I think looking back in hindsight, my greatest, I don't want to say regret, because again, all these things lead to my now more wholesome character and self. that will never be fully cooked, right? I'll never be fully done growing in character. But I never felt good about the fact that I would leave my apartment constantly knowing how much I paid for those apartments. I rented until I got married, and it was only until I met David that I found a healthy balance between being in my apartment and not. But, you know, it was just one thing to act as though I had this really great social life. And in reality, it was, well, only because I forced myself to not be alone. Um, Even as an adult, I take the narrative of saying, well, maybe if I portray a high value as a person, a friend, a colleague, an employee, a confidant, that I will inherently have a greater impact. And as you can see, that led me to a life of living double lives for at least the 4 years following my college graduation. And I can say to this day, it is easily the longest functioning depressive episode and season of my life. And that's coming off the heels of a postpartum depression and anxiety stretch. That those 4 years cumulatively had to happen in order for me to be who I am today, because it was a full sense of trying to be as inauthentic as I could to be loved inauthentically as well. Many people don't love us just for what we show them in the moment. The right people will love you no matter what. The wrong people will only love you when you give them something in the moment. And I just, if you got to rewind that, because of course I don't remember exactly how I said it, but it sounded really good. I just know that being yourself around the people that you love most never fails you. If anything, there's a greater respect. But at the time, I didn't know that. So this is a lot of heavy stuff. I get it. I, again, was nervous to even share it. But as melodramatic as it sounds and as tough as it sounds to be like, wow, like tough school life. And then, you went through a bit of a rebellious period, which I learned is normal for everyone to go through a rebellious stage. So that 4 years of my life, I count that as my rebellion. Um, it's not everyone's journey, but I didn't want to sugarcoat what I went through and in my public school years for fear that I wouldn't be honest with you of why I grew up to be an adult with pretty significant self-esteem issues. It stemmed from a life that was just pretty bleak for a kid in public school just trying to learn how to be a person. So some of these go without saying, but let's talk about the reasons why this delusion is so dangerous. Thinking that if we're not received positively by people, we're clearly not valuable. The tendency to please other people out of desperation, just so you're seen as valuable, it has nothing to do with your character. If you're trying to make it about your good character, it really is not. It's actually an utter rejection of yourself. The cruelty of the children in my school days, it taught me that the more embarrassing I am, the less of a positive impression I'm giving. And so I decided that I need to either do everything that those people want me to do so I can be seen as valuable, or I'm going to isolate myself so I never have to disappoint anyone else and not disappoint myself. And that's heavy stuff, guys. But disappointing yourself usually stems from disappointing someone else that you love. And you feel like you let somebody down, even if it was purely a mistake. But it's the most dangerous downward spiral I know of today. I have to actually even be careful about doing this pod because as I'm taking notes prepping for it, I thought I don't want to relive this narrative again. By telling my story now, it's getting it out, it's showing you that this exists in my history, but it is not who I am. This is who I was back then with the information I had at the time and the self-esteem I had at the time, and I'm becoming very well educated now on this delusion and getting myself out of it. When you have lack of self-appreciation, you inevitably stop doing anything positive and getting yourself out there. I got to shout out the title of this podcast, Influencer Gone Offline. When you think of the word influencer, It's almost always a social media mogul that capitalizes on every brand they make a post about, and they seem to be the best possible people pleasers, but they are probably the most fake behind the scenes, right? Like that's a general view of what an influencer is. But why do we feel disappointed when we're not influential in our own circle? And sometimes that's not outright spoken, that's just somehow felt that we don't feel influential. We stop wanting to try to be positive and impactful on others around us because creating impact that can be seen with a naked eye, it's harder and harder in this world to see because we have a lot of distractions, a lot of craziness going on in this world right now. And to give someone even 5 minutes of your attention, if you're this far, you're giving 25 minutes of your attention to me just to try to find some peace and understanding in your life. So I want to get to some takeaways here because as much as I've shared stories about myself, I know you must be thinking of stories with yourself and how people have given you reason to doubt that you had value because the times when it hurts the most are when you know you're the most authentic. Like, you know, deep down you did and said everything you would have done or said, no matter who you were talking to. Some things we got to understand, and I'm talking to myself, like I said, judgment free zone. Your value is exclusive of others' opinions, especially ones from kids that were just trying to fit in like you. And we're also trying to find ways to make you on a lower pedestal so that they can seem higher. And I don't know if you noticed this, but there are a lot of adults today that they didn't grow out of that behavior and they still try to make others feel lesser than so that they can feel bigger and better. And I'm here to tell you that's going to crash and burn on those people one day. You might not see it in your lifetime, but it'll happen. And like Brene Brown says, my worth is non negotiable. So we can talk about a lot of ways to improve behavior and habits and just general self improvement, but you can't be inauthentic just to be someone else's value. That is a completely different game. It's not about becoming someone different, it's about becoming somebody wholeheartedly happy with who they are and what they stand for. Deep down, we're likely only going to provide true positive impact and impressions to the people that would gladly pour that same positivity and friendship onto us without meeting any type of standard, without playing any type of game. So honestly, if you and I are friends now or we're friends to be, this is a self-disclosure. I don't see awkward moments and embarrassment leaving for me anytime soon. It comes with my authenticity. I am an odd duck in a lot of ways, and I've learned to embrace it, but as I shared, it was not easy to embrace. Um, something that I'll talk later on is the fact that I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome when I was 25, so 7 or 8 years ago now. And even though that feels like old news to me, it was pretty jaw-dropping 25 years into life knowing that I actually had neurological reason for being an odd duck. It was kind of, like I said, humbling, but at the same time, talk about the fact that I had to be even more comfortable with being my authentic self because my authentic self is neurodivergent. And I'll leave that there for now, but we're totally talking about that later because I think we're all a little delulu. And I think it's probably because we're all a little neurodivergent. When I was a kid, I would listen to Joyce Meyer in the car with my mom. She's a TV evangelist and has done conferences that my mom and I've gone to. And she quotes this random statistic all the time. I don't know where she got this information, but she constantly says that 10% of people will never like you no matter what you do. And I have started to actually use that statistic and metric for myself in a good way. I don't use actual numbers, but I use the theory of it. So I actually, believe it or not, got some negative feedback about this pod already after the first episode. And I thought, well, that feedback probably fits in less than 10% of people I've spoken to about this whole podcast. And I take that as a good thing because it means that I'm authentically doing what I know I need to be for this pod. And I shouldn't even anticipate 90% of people to like it, but I can definitely guarantee 10% will not. So it gives me hope in the doubt that I am not crazy by being myself. And I can't let people continue to tell me that I am and believe them. So in the show notes this week, I've placed 2 songs in there that speak to me about the common elements that reveal what it's like when I find myself in this spiral of retelling the stories that everyone around me said when it was so negative and it got me to believe that my value was low because my impression on others was seemingly low as well. The first song is called Favorite Sound by Audien and Echo Smith, which is speaking to the fact that we can be lost in our self doubt and become our own enemy if we aren't careful. But by doing the hardcore work of therapy and knowing this is a belief that can be changed, it's not our reality, we can begin to have the voice of our positive affirmations and the ones that come from what God says about us and how we are and what our own mouths can speak. And those voices and affirmations can become our favorite sounds if we let them. And when I tell you, I can't listen to that song without replaying it 2 to 3 times. It's so beautiful. EDM or not, I love it. The second song is called You Say by Lauren Daigle. This song put Lauren on the map. In 2018, this is when it came out. And this was also when I was switching gears in a lot of the decisions I was making in life in how I was going to choose to live the way God intended for me to live for the rest of my days, or if I was going to live out my days like anyone in the world would. And I think the great crux of this decision came in who I was finally willing to believe who I was at the depth and the core, and not at the surface level that I'd been showing everyone. Because, see, emotions are going to fluctuate from highs and lows in the same day. And whenever I get the urge to believe the devil's lie of all of those kids at Boyertown, all of those people that made me seem lesser than, and I feel like a loser, I eventually come around and start to listen to messages like this song that say the exact opposite about that. So in the case of Lauren Daigle, I love to scream sing this song in the car, especially these lyrics. You say I am loved when I don't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short. When I don't belong, oh, you say I am yours. I believe what you say to me. That last line, I believe what you say to me. It's like make it our mantra. Actually choose to believe what God says about you over anyone else. So I'll close in saying that if someone told you that you simply need to get over what happened to you in your formative years as a child, I would ask that you humbly and calmly end that conversation with that person. Set a boundary that you will not give them the privilege to listen to your story or be witness to the impact you have by sharing that story. If people listen to this podcast now and are like, God, girl, get over it, I would respectfully have to decline continuing that conversation with you too. Getting over things is not by any means meant to be quick. It's not by any means meant to be sliding off your back when it's all you knew how to be as a kid and you are retraining your mind. So I will never, ever tell somebody that they need to get over it. That stuff follows you until you go to address it. And those people typically, hope this ain't too savage, but that clearly shows me that those people have also not been willing to walk the hard road of getting to a clearer image of what their past was meant to show them and not live in a fabrication of what anyone says about them. So hopefully you will send this podcast to that person and they will hear that they do not need to be alone. That this is not something that they need to be prideful of and rigid on and closed-minded on and isolate themselves. It's a common theme of humanity that we have to go through something to learn why we would really want to bond with the true values that we make active choices to carry on into our life. Thank you so much for listening today. Be sure to like, subscribe, share this podcast with a friend who might struggle with some hardcore delusions like you and I, so we can work out our delusions together.